Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our very exciting webinar on creating accessible social media content for your community. I got a little sneak peek of this presentation and it's really good. So thank you for joining us today. As we wait for people to trickle in, let's do the usual. Please let us know in the chat where you're joining from. I am joining from Halifax, and I just looked out the window a second ago, and I fear that it is snowing. So if anyone's joining from somewhere sunny, I'm jealous, as per usual. Oh, we have another Halifax attendee. Love that.
It was Chicago, so I'm like an hour outside of Chicago.
Oh, nice.
It's cold and gloomy here.
Okay, but not snowing, so that...
No, but it could be snowing tomorrow. You never know with Chicago.
So true, so true. We have Las Vegas, Boston, Washington. Awesome. Oh, a couple more Boston.
Washington, D.C., unfortunately.
Oh, I didn't catch that part. Just for the first part.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Not Canada. That's cool.
Yay. Okay, so we are going to jump into it, but I do have, as per usual, just a couple of housekeeping slides. So let's go over those now. In case this is your first time joining us today, hi, hello, hey, we are HeyOrca. We're a social media scheduler, social media management tool for teams and agencies. This is not a sales pitch, but if you have a large team or a growing team, I would recommend checking us out because we do offer unlimited users on your HeyOrca subscription. So you don't have to pay every time you add a new user to your account. Okay, and let's do some introductions. My name is Lyle. I'm a marketing manager here at HeyOrca, and today I'm joined by the lovely Alexa.
Hi, I'm Alexa. I'm the creator of the Accessible Social website, and I'm a social media manager located in the Chicagoland area, and I work for a college in Florida.
Awesome. And we will put in the chat the link to Alexa's website, Accessible Social. So you should definitely check it out. Sorry, that was a mouthful. I just stumbled over it.
I do it all the time, believe me.
Okay, and we do have, as per usual, a couple giveaways today. So there's 2 ways to win an Amazon gift card. And the first way is super easy. We're going to add a link to our LinkedIn poll in the chat, and all you have to do is answer the poll. So the question today is, do you add alt text to your social media content? And be honest when you answer. Honest answers only. Thank you. And then the second way to win is you can share what you learned from the webinar today on LinkedIn. Just make a LinkedIn post about what you learned today and tag us so we can see it. And then we'll randomly draw of those posts someone to win the second Amazon gift card. And actually, if you do number 2, you have a better chance of winning because we get more poll entries than we do posts about the webinar. So if you want to up your chances, definitely do number 2. Do both of them, but number 2 for sure. And finally, we do have a summit coming up. We're very excited about it. Tickets are still available, but we are more than 50% sold out. So this is a really awesome session we're having in Toronto on May 8th. And we have some really, really good speakers lined up. So definitely check that out. And you can visit, Jesse just pops the link to the webpage about that in the chat. So give it a look. And I think that's all for me. I'll hand it over to Alexa now.
Thank you. Let me get my screen set up here.
Let's take your time.
One moment here.
Oh, I completely forgot. Before this, while you're getting that,
I
would like to ask the chat. Alexa blew my mind with this. Chrome users, please let me know in the chat. Did you know that you can group your tabs together and color coordinate the groups? Because I had no idea, and I actually, clearly I'm too excited about it because after this webinar, that's what I'm going to be doing.
I changed Lyle's life, basically.
Oh, yes.
I made it so much better. And the rest of the HeyOrca team that's in here. So.
Okay, look, there's so many people are saying they had no idea, so that's amazing.
All right, I'm going to turn my camera off just so my Wi-Fi has one less thing to do, and then let me get set up here.
Sounds good.
So excited for this presentation.
The other thing I want to mention while you're getting set up is we will be saving questions for the end of this presentation. So I won't be interrupting Alexa with questions. And it would be really, really helpful for me if you have questions, if you can please put them in the Q&A tab of the chat, because that way I can just find them faster when it is Q&A time. Otherwise, I'm not as good as Alyssa on reading the chat, so I might miss them if you don't put them in the Q&A tab.
All right. On that note, I'm going to start my presentation. Lyle, if anything happens, just shout out to me since I can't see you.
Sounds good.
But I'm very excited about this. So this is Accessible Social. We're going to talk about how to create inclusive social media content. So to start things off, let's talk about disability and the importance of accessibility so you understand why accessible social media content is so important. Now, an estimated 15 to 25% of the global population has some sort of disability. This estimation could also be much larger because not everyone is comfortable disclosing that they have a disability or considers themselves disabled. There's a wide range of disabilities that exist in the world, from physical to cognitive, but for the purposes of this presentation, I will mostly focus on disabilities that affect a person's hearing and vision. I will also reference different assistive technology throughout the presentation, including screen readers and text-to-speech programs. You're going to get to experience my phone's text-to-speech program as well, as I use it for various demonstrations. Now, when it comes to accessibility, many digital marketers and content creators want to know what makes it important for social media and what it means to be inclusive online. Not everyone experiences or navigates digital spaces the same way. There are millions of people with disabilities who rely on assistive technology and practices to access digital content. Now, disability is diverse and it comes in different forms. Most people think of permanent states when disability is mentioned, such as vision or hearing loss that cannot be medically treated or reversed. But disability is actually the only diverse community that you can join and leave. Some individuals are born with their disability, while others become disabled later in life. A person could be temporarily disabled due to an injury like a broken leg or an illness such as losing your hearing from an ear infection. Someone could also have a situational disability, which means they're affected by their environment or circumstances. There are also episodic disabilities, which are disabilities that have no discernible pattern. They can affect you at any given time and change how you interact with the world. So examples would be migraines, vertigo, chronic pain, stuff like that. And dynamic disabilities are similar to episodic disabilities in that they usually have no discernible pattern. They swing in severity where all or one of the symptoms of a chronic illness are more active or worsen for a period of time. I'm telling you all this so you understand that your online audience is probably way more diverse than you realize. You need to think beyond your own lived experiences when creating content if you want it to be inclusive. There are several distinct reasons why accessibility matters for digital content. Above all, you should just care about the experience that your followers have when they engage with you or your brand on social media. Everyone at some point or another will be affected by disability, either through age, illness, or injury. Disability is something that impacts every single demographic. For many people, social media is a trusted source of information that they turn to during life-threatening or dangerous events. If emergency content isn't accessible, the health and safety of countless lives could be put at risk. Inclusive best practices can have a direct impact on your marketing efforts and affect how many people you actually reach with your digital content. And like with a brick and mortar location or your website, you also want to make sure that your social media is meeting current accessibility guidelines and regulations. Now that you know why you should be creating accessible social media content, it's time to learn how. I'm going to take us through accessible practices for copy and formatting, images and visuals, and audio and video. And while the outline practices I'll be discussing mostly cover social media, many of them are also applicable to other areas of marketing, such as website management, email marketing, graphic design, and PDF creation. Apologies. Our first best practices section is going to cover copy and formatting. A lot of people don't realize that elements such as upper and lowercase letters, numbers, break characters, and even spaces can impact how an assistive device like a screen reader interacts with your content. Because most social media platforms don't offer formatting options, some users will find ways to manipulate their content to achieve the formatted look they want. This kind of forced formatting is commonly seen in posts where the author has used multiple spaces, tabs, and hard returns to make their content appear in 2 columns. My example post here looks like it's in 2 columns. However, the blue arrows that I've manually placed between the columns show that tabs were used to create this forced formatting. A screen reader is going to follow the path of the blue arrows because there's no true gutter in the post that tells it to do otherwise. Therefore, the content gets read out of order and sounds like this.
This is the path. Please stop formatting. Your screen reader follows tweets to look like this just when you force your for the sake of viral memes. Tweets into 2 columns. It's not accessible. Thanks.
Not exactly easy to understand. Until platforms add formatting options, you should compose your social media content knowing it will be read left to right or right to left in a single column by assistive devices and programs. You should also be aware of how you use upper and lowercase letters. Some internet users will type in varied case to indicate mocking sarcasm in their content. Varied case is when you alternate every letter between uppercase and lowercase. The varied letter case makes it exceptionally hard for a screen reader to properly read the words and can create a confusing experience for users, as demonstrated in this example post.
I have a Facebook. I know how social media works. Social media manager. I have AAF ACAD 00KIKN0W how social media W or K5.
It is so hard for me not to laugh through that portion, and I'd be impressed if anyone understood that line at all. Formatting is also important for hashtags. You'll want to use capital letters in your compound hashtags to separate the words properly. This method is referred to as Pascal case, title case, and sometimes camel case. The capital letters help assistive devices denote the separate words, allowing them to pronounce compound hashtags correctly and not as one long mishmashed word. Just listen to how the all lowercase hashtag on this slide sounds.
Autopyrism.
Versus how the hashtag in Pascal case sounds.
Occupy are awesome.
One more listen for the all lowercase hashtag.
Autopyrism.
In comparison to the Pascal case hashtag.
Occupy are awesome.
Definitely a noticeable difference between the two. Proper formatting is also easier for literally everyone to read, no matter the status of their vision. It's just how our eyes track the shape of letters. So you always want to make sure that you're formatting your compound hashtags correctly. Moving on to my favorite section, emoji. Everyone loves those colorful icons, but did you know that each individual emoji has its own unique description assigned to it? When an assisted device comes across an emoji in written content, it will use the icon's assigned description to accurately describe it to the user. Many emoji also have descriptions and appearances that differ across platforms, devices, and browsers. This particular emoji is known as abandoned house, old house, haunted house, and derelict house, depending on how it's being viewed, which is also why this probably looks out of the ordinary if you were an Apple device user, because this is not what our emoji look like, but this is what it looks like when I do it through a Microsoft product. Even emoji with skin tones get additional information added to their base description to keep them unique. If a screen reader were to read this line of emoji, it would say raised hand light skin tone, raised hand medium light skin tone, raised hand medium skin tone, raised hand medium dark skin tone, and raised hand dark skin tone. You should keep in mind that because a screen reader picks up on the descriptions of emoji, the excessive use of them is not advised. It's also worth noting that some assistive devices will condense a line of emoji if only one specific icon is used uninterrupted by other icons, characters, or spaces. For instance, this group of emoji would probably be read as 24 rockets instead of a screen reader saying the word rocket 24 times. It's best to put emoji at the end of your content. Otherwise, you could make your message confusing, like with this example post that has a few emojis sprinkled throughout the copy. Once a text-to-speech program translated the emoji, the content ran into several clarity issues, as demonstrated in this short screen recording.
Having a great time on vacation in Colorado's snow-capped mountain. Gonna get some prime skiing in tomorrow skiing. Before ending the day with hot cocoa hot beverage. By the fire with my BFF women with multiple skin tones holding hands.
Sounds a little wonky with all those emoji interruptions. Using emoji as bullet points is also quite popular on social media, But unfortunately, using emoji that way could make your points confusing if the icon descriptions are competing with the content as shown in this second example post.
Keys to a great keynote speech. Face with tears of joy. Don't be afraid to crack jokes world map. Going off script is okay mouth. Have confident body language.
As demonstrated, the 3 emoji descriptions interrupted the flow of the copy and made it a little difficult to understand. It's better to just use dashes for your bullet points when standard list formatting isn't available, or simply use 2 hard returns to more clearly separate your points. An excellent resource for content creators is the website Emojipedia. It lists every known emoji along with their different appearances and descriptions across platforms, devices, and browsers. It's an absolutely great website. So when it comes to emoji on social media, you should use them in moderation, double check their description before using them, place them at the end of posts to avoid clarity issues, and try to resist changing the color on customizable emoji unless a specific skin tone is necessary for context. That last tip applies mostly to the management of professional brand accounts. I would never presume to tell someone what emoji skin tones they should use to represent their own identity on their personal social media. Another best practice for copywriting is one that focuses on a trend that has become quite popular on social media in recent years. Content creators have started using external websites to generate alternative characters for their posts to make the copy appear in different weights, styles, and fonts. You'll notice that the yellow has highlighted text that's in a different font from Twitter's default font in these 2 posts. And I do apologize. I still say Twitter and still use the Twitter branding of old, so just not to confuse anyone. Now, unfortunately, some assistive devices cannot decipher these characters and will typically skip over them, as I'm going to show in this first example post. I used alternative characters for the first 3 lines of text and then Twitter's default font for the latter half of the post. This is how my phone's text-to-speech program handled it.
Accessible social. At Carl Camel Case. Unfortunately, not all assistive devices can read these alternative characters, making them inaccessible.
My text-to-speech program completely skipped the first 3 lines of the post because it could not identify them as readable characters. So you should definitely avoid using these in your content. Even worse are the alternative characters that assistive devices translate into indistinguishable noises or totally different languages, like in this second example post. Brace yourselves for this one.
Accessible social. At Carl Camel Case. Circled Latin capital letter S.
Well, I only showcased a few seconds of that post because I didn't want to torture us. It actually took almost 2.5 minutes for my phone's text-to-speech program to read the whole thing aloud, when logically it should only take a few seconds. So content creators should only use the default fonts and formatting options readily available on the platforms. Another popular trend on social media that involves the use of characters is called ASCII art. It uses letters, numbers, punctuation, and other characters to create illustrative memes, and is commonly seen on text-based platforms like Twitter, Threads, and Blue Sky. ASCII art is used more frequently by major brands as they try to appear more casual and less robotic online. However, ASCII art is not accessible for screen reader users. Assistive devices are programmed to read characters and punctuation marks as they were originally intended. They cannot properly discern when characters are used to create illustrations, and when read aloud, ASCII art normally sounds something like this.
Bullet underscore bullet. Vertical line. U. Vertical line. ASCII art. Isn't accessible. Vertical line. 15 underscores. 3 underscores. Vertical line. Vertical line, vertical line, vertical line, vertical line. Vertical line, vertical line, vertical line, vertical line. Left paren right. Square bracket left, square bracket right paren.
I wish I could see everyone's faces for that one because I'm sure it's shocked like most people usually are. So the art is clever, but it doesn't make much sense once a screen reader gets a hold of it. So you should definitely avoid using ASCII art in your content if you want it to be accessible. This next section is typically the one that I get the most questions about, how to be accessible with images and visuals. Now, images play a key part on social media, as we all know, but how does someone with a vision disability experience a picture? Assistive devices need textual information that provides a descriptive summary of an image's key visual details. This can be done by writing image descriptions and using a platform's designated alt text field. User experience is greatly impacted if an image isn't accessible. Take these two posts, for example. They are seemingly identical, except that one had an image description added to it and the other did not. Here's what the first post sounds like through my phone's text-to-speech program.
Accessible social. At Carl Campbell Case. It's important to write good descriptions for your images to make them accessible. Don't ignore the alt text field. Image. A branch of delicate pink cherry blossoms under a clear blue sky. 1 minute ago.
Versus what the second post sounds like.
Accessible social. At Carl Campbell Case. It's important to write good descriptions for your images to make them accessible. Don't ignore the alt text field. Image. 1 minute ago.
The first post obviously had an image description written for it, while the second one did not, which is why there was nothing said about the image except for image. So it made a noticeable difference in the text-to-speech experience. Now, long-standing platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Pinterest all have designated alt text fields where you can write custom image descriptions, as do newer platforms like Threads and Blue Sky. Many third-party sites will also allow you to write alt text for social media images. This is a sampling of a few different management systems and how they handle image accessibility. Instagram just very recently adjusted their API, so more third-party systems like HeyOrca should be able to access the alt text field for that platform soon. Meta Business Suite on desktop can also be used to schedule posts with image descriptions to Facebook pages and Instagram business accounts. Now, writing image descriptions stresses a lot of people out, so here are a few tips on how to write them effectively along with some examples. You want to write in plain language. Focus on describing the physical aspects of your chosen image. Resist the urge to be ornate or overly effusive with your image descriptions. You don't want your own opinions or feelings about an image interfere with your ability to write an accurate description. It's okay to be a little creative with your writing, but avoid going overboard. Try to be as objective as possible. Focus on accuracy, not length. I normally make my image descriptions pretty short, but that's also dependent on the image that I choose. The more complex the image, the longer the description of it will more than likely be, especially if the image features any copy. Writing an image description is a completely subjective exercise, no matter how objective you try to be. Just focus on making your image description as accurate as possible, and you should do just fine. Consider positional information. So think about the view someone has when they're looking at your image. Is it a partial view of someone sitting at a table? Do you have a bird's eye view of a snow-covered forest? Directional and positional information can add important context to your image description. You can exclude writing photo of or image of in your image description. It's already assumed that your image description will be for a photo or image, and a screen reader will more than likely say image before or after reading it if you've placed it in a designated alt text field. However, if the visual you're trying to describe is something like an illustration, a painting, a graphic, or even a screenshot, you can include that in your image description because it gives the user a better idea of how to navigate the visual. It's okay to use proper nouns and names. So if a notable person, place, or thing is in your image and it adds context to your content, go ahead and use its proper name in your image description. You don't need to describe everything. If something in your image is significant to understanding the whole visual or post, describe it in your image description. If it's not, skip it. You don't need to include every nitty-gritty detail. The details you include in your image description should be contextually important to painting an accurate picture in someone's mind. Now, this next tip should be given careful consideration since it was written by a white cis woman. Identity and representation are complex and multifaceted subjects that should always be treated with respect and care. You can use personal identifiers for people when needed in your alt text. If the race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, age, or another identifier for a person is relevant to the overall context of a visual, feel free to add it to your image description. It also helps in this instance to think of your content as a whole. What info is included in the written part of your post? As the content author, do you feel that personal identifiers in your image description would add contextual value to the rest of your content? For example, Let's say you work for a college and your content is about introducing girls and young women of color to careers in STEM. The race, age, and gender of the people in your images would probably be contextually important information. If you're unsure about how the subject of an image identifies or don't want to assume how they identify, stick to using neutral terms such as person instead of man or woman. Of course, the best way to ascertain how someone in your images identifies is to simply ask them if you can. Just make sure to explain to your subject that you're trying to accurately represent them and their identity in your content. Avoid abbreviations whenever possible. It's better to type out the full name or title of a person, place, or thing because screen readers don't always read abbreviations like acronyms and initialisms correctly. If you use an initialism in your image description or any of your digital content for that matter, type out the full name or title first and then place spaces or periods in between each letter of the initialism. An initialism is an abbreviation consisting of initial letters pronounced separately. So examples would be USA, SEO, and FBI. An acronym is an abbreviation formed from the initial letters of other words when pronounced as a word. So think of NATO, NASA, SCUBA. Those are all considered acronyms. And you can add keywords for improved SEO. This tip is more applicable to images on traditional websites, as search engines don't supposedly index information from alt text field on social media platforms. However, keywords in Instagram's alt text field do supposedly affect search results for posts within the app. Just make sure that you're prioritizing the accurate description of your image. You should never keyword pack your image descriptions just to improve the performance of your content. If you can logically work your keywords into your image description, go for it. If not, that's what hashtags are for. And then avoid using images with excessive copy on them. If you're posting a copy-heavy graphic like an event flyer or an image that has text overlaid on it, you'll need to add information in your image description for all the flattened copy. Otherwise, a screen reader will not be able to read it. It's also not actionable or clickable if it's on an image. So JPEG, PNG, and GIF files do not support readable text. It's just something to keep in mind when you're choosing images. Now that you have a better understanding of how to write effective image descriptions, let's talk about what shouldn't go in a designated alt text field. Emoji icons are typically added to social media content to give it added visual interest, so adding them to an alt text field makes no sense and could result in confusing image descriptions depending on the icons that you use, as we discussed earlier. If you put a link in an alt text field, it's not going to be clickable and a screen reader will just read it out like any other word in your image description. Links should go in the written part of your post, not the alt text field. Like with links, hashtags also aren't clickable in alt text fields and do not typically add additional context that would make an image description more accessible. Additional symbols like the ones for trademark, copyright, and registered don't make an image description more accessible and will get read aloud by a screen reader, so avoid using them. And any non-essential information such as strings of random keywords, photographer credits, promotional information, calls to action, secret messages, hidden jokes, or any other information that doesn't make your image description more accessible should not be put in the alt text field. In our final section, we're going to quickly go over making audio and video accessible. Now, no matter where a video is posted, whether it's on a website or social media, it should have captions so that deaf and hard of hearing users can access the content. Captions can also provide a better experience for a viewer with a learning disability, an attention deficit, or if they are autistic. They're also helpful if you don't understand the spoken language, you're in a noisy environment, a video has poor audio, or if a speaker is talking too fast or has an accent. I personally watch everything with captions on just because it's easier for me to absorb information when it's in a visual format versus an audio format. So I love captions, makes everything much easier for me. A staggering 92% of US consumers view videos with sound off on mobile, according to a 2019 report from Verizon Media and Publicis Media. It's not unusual to think that this probably applies to the rest of the world as well. The survey also found that people are 80% more likely to watch an entire video if it includes captions. Now, captions come in two forms, closed and open. Closed captions can be toggled on and off based on the preferences of the viewer and are typically an option on platforms like Netflix and YouTube. They can usually be moved and adjusted to adapt to different screen sizes and orientations as well. Open captions, on the other hand, are permanently burned onto a video and always visible. They're also referred to as embedded or burned captions. Open captions cannot be turned off, moved, or resized, and they're normally used when closed captioning isn't an option or if a content creator wants more creative freedom over the look and feel of their captions. If you're trying to decide between using closed or open captions, choose closed. They offer a more customizable experience for viewers in terms of visibility, position, and size, so they are the preferred option. Open captions should really only be used when closed captioning isn't available. Some social media platforms have built-in captioning capabilities, but if you want to use an app, there are several affordable options, including mixed captions, Clip-O-Matic, AutoCap, CapCut, and Clips. You can also use YouTube or services and software like Rev.com, Camtasia, Otter AI, or Final Cut Pro. Okay, I just threw a lot of information at you, but thank you for tuning in. We're going to move into the Q&A portion where I'm going to answer some questions, but please be sure to visit accessible-social.com to learn more about accessible best practices for social media and find the latest information. So I've packed the site with useful demonstrations, tips, and additional resources that support everything we've learned in this webinar today.
Awesome, Alexa. Thank you so much. Just judging on the chat, I think everyone really learned a lot from that. And we do have a few questions for you. I also did put your website link in the chat, so everyone definitely go check that out. And I think we should just jump into the questions because it looks like there's actually more than a few here.
Okay.
So the first one, before we hit publish on a post, are there any online tools out there that we can use to test in a screen reader?
So you don't actually need an online tool. If you have a smartphone, they all have accessibility features built into them. So that's what I use when I'm testing content. I just use my phone. So I have an iPhone. It's called VoiceOver. I think for Android users, it's called TalkBack. So if I want to test content, I will turn that on and listen to what my content sounds like. I just highly advise that you read the instructions for using the VoiceOver program on your phone because it does take a lot of getting used to if you're not used to navigating with it because it's all touch-based. So it's like double taps and swipes to navigate through your phone. I accidentally activated it once while I was driving and it called 911 somehow and I couldn't get it to turn off. And I ended up hanging up on 911, which you're not supposed to do. And then I got VoiceOver to turn off. 911 called me back and was like, ma'am, are you okay? I was like, well, I wasn't 2 minutes ago. Yeah. So read the instructions for stuff like that. But yeah, using it on your phone is really eye-opening, which is how I always test my content.
Awesome. Good to know. I feel like you also have the funniest stories always. So
always. I'm a walking disaster. So.
I'll just say that. Okay, next question. Does putting the emojis at the end of the text instead of within the text affect accessibility ranking and reduce the scoring for SEO?
I don't know if it affects ranking of any sort, and I don't actually know how much social media is impacted with SEO just because search engines don't always index the content on social media. It's weird. But I would say that Google probably doesn't consider emoji when it's prioritizing content just because it's an accessibility thing that not a lot of people realize. So I don't know if they actually know that. So I can't speak intelligently to that question, unfortunately.
That's totally fair. Okay, it looks like we have another question about hashtags. So platforms like YouTube automatically lowercase all letters in a hashtag when you're adding it to your video description. How do you recommend being accessible while also optimizing messages for social media?
Unfortunately, you have to do it manually. LinkedIn does the same thing as does Instagram, and I'm constantly just manually fixing hashtags. I'm also not like a big hashtag user, so I only use a few, which makes it a lot easier for me to double check that my hashtags are formatted correctly. And it's also worth noting that that only really applies to like compound hashtags. So if you're just using a hashtag for a single word, you don't really need to worry about the letter case for it. It's going to read it properly no matter what. It's really only for those compound hashtags. And sometimes you will get lucky and a compound hashtag could be in all lowercase and still be read properly. It just really depends on where the vowels are in the words. That's what screws up screen readers when it tries to combine vowels that are next to each other. So you really just, sometimes it's a matter of doing the work manually in order to make sure it's inclusive.
That sounds good. I will say too, like using HeyOrca, you can save hashtags to your hashtag library in that pastel case. So when you click them to add them to your post, they're already formatted like that.
Yeah, that's so nice.
Yes, I find that good too, because yeah, manually doing them is necessary in some cases, but it can
I have a lot of hashtags saved in like my notes app for some posts that I know I'm going to use the same cluster of hashtags whenever I do actually do that. So I love that HeyOrca has that feature.
I love it too. Okay, so do screen readers pull any alt text info from metadata if that was added when editing photos?
I don't know if it's when it's editing photos, but I will say, because I wish they would do that. I wish that metadata always transferred over when you upload it to a social media platform. Unfortunately, that's not the case. A lot of people have commented that, oh, Meta platforms automatically have alt text. Like Meta has tried to push on Facebook, Threads, and Instagram that when you upload an image, there's automatic alt text applied to it. Do not rely on automatic alt text. It is garbage. It's really bad. You don't want to rely on that. It's usually a jumble of random words, like two people outside, and that's all the description you get, which is not helpful because it's really vague and not descriptive. So I don't know about pulling metadata over from an actual image, but I know that Meta, the company, has automatic alt text, but we don't want to use that.
Okay, that's good to know. Another shameless plug for HeyOrca, we do have an AI-powered alt text generator. So this tool will look at your image and generate some suggestions for alt text. And you don't have to use the suggestions exactly. You would want to tweak them to make sure they're on brand and everything for you. But if you have trouble coming up with alt text, because it can be really tricky, I find that's a good place to start just to get the ideas sort of flowing so you can get in that rhythm of writing it all the time.
Yes, you can totally do that. I know there's like different extensions for Chat GPT where people have done that, upload an image. And like Lyle said, you definitely always want to double check whatever alt text a AI system is going to give you, because an AI, while very useful, is not going to have contextual knowledge of how your image is going to be used, which is really important. So if I do it for the college that I work for, it's not going to necessarily know about the college. It's not going to know whatever occasion the image is taken at. So you really want to be aware of that. Plus, AI is capable of errors, as we know, and it can be biased.
Totally. Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay, when do this one. How did you get into advocating for accessible social media?
So when I was working in Chicago, like, gosh, 8 years ago, maybe at this point, I worked for a large community college system. I was the content marketer, I think was my title, which meant that I handled a lot of different things, but social media was my main priority. And I also updated like the sliders on our homepage. And when I was doing that one day, the digital strategist on my team asked me if I was adding alt text to those web sliders. And I just looked at her like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I have a graphic design background. I don't know what that is because it's not taught in school. It was not taught to my major. Mm-hmm. So she explained what it was. And then I went home that night and I wanted to know more. And I realized this was something that you could do with social media. And I distinctly remember sitting there and I started crying because I had this horrible realization that I was possibly an obstacle to people, learning more about the colleges because my content wasn't accessible. And it just kind of radicalized me to accessible social media content. And I started talking about it more. I started writing about it. I started like really pressing it with my peers in the industry of marketing. And then eventually I was always getting so many of the same questions. And I'm like, I'm just going to build a website. And that's what I did, because when I learned about accessibility, there was not a place for me to go on the internet that was specific to social media. I had to bounce all over to different blogs, different articles, different resources to find the information I needed. So in order for future marketers to not struggle like I did, I built Accessible Social. So we have one place where you can find accessibility information specific to social media marketing.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think it's so important because I found the same thing when I started in social media. Like there really wasn't a resource for it, but thank you for creating it. It's
You're
awesome.
welcome.
Okay, next question. What are your thoughts on writing OC instead of CC to be more accurate on open captions on social media videos?
I'm totally for it because I don't have TikTok anymore, but I always laughed before TikTok had a captioning function a few years ago. Creators were doing their own captions using the text tool. And I always laughed because they would put CC and then they would start typing. I was like, well, it's not though. They're open captions. So I don't see a problem, but it might be helpful if when you start with the open captions, you actually type open captions. And then as they change, you can put OC or just do straight, just write the caption. We already know you've established their open captions, or you can just say captions. You don't need to really specify. It's not like the viewer is really going to need to know what kind it is. They can see if they can turn them off or not. So you can just put captions.
Okay, I love that. How do you make Instagram stories accessible?
Instagram stories are the bane of my existence.
Oh, no.
There is no good way to make them perfectly accessible because you can't write alt text for them. The best you can do for an Instagram story is if you have the visual, obviously, and then also do a voiceover for it, which is just a lot of work, honestly, for an Instagram story. I've tried to get Meta to give us an alt text option because for anyone who remembers Fleets on Twitter a few years ago, when they launched it, it had alt text. And I lost my ever loving mind because they launched a new feature with alt text, which is just like unheard of for social media platforms. And I was like, well, Twitter can do it. Why can't Meta do it for its story functions? So it was heartbreaking to me when they got rid of it because it was the only accessible version of a story that we had. So I'm really, really hoping that Meta will fix that and add an alt text feature for Facebook stories and Instagram stories, because right now we don't have a really easy way to make them accessible. A lot of times I suggest to people, if something is super, super, super important, if you're going to put it in your story, you should also make an accompanying post in your feed about it where you can get more information in a more accessible manner. Or if you're in the story, link to somewhere where someone's going to get the information they need in an accessible format. So yeah, stories make everything hard.
You saying Fleets, though, just unlocked something. I've heard of them before. I had forgotten all about it. Okay, I think we might have time for just one more question. Apologies if I didn't get to your question, but you can always follow Alexa on LinkedIn and perhaps ask her a question there, or you can ask it to us too on the HeyOrca accounts. So final question, what are your thoughts on caption positioning given overlap with other info, especially on TikTok, or when people have auto-generated captions turned on for their accounts already?
It's positioning captions in TikTok or Instagram Reels is so difficult. I really wish, and I don't know how it is on TikTok. Again, I got rid of TikTok because it was going to rot my brain. Too much 3 a.m. scrolling. But I like how on Instagram Reels, you get the preview of where everything's going to be before you post it. And I wish that was more of a known thing. I always try to get my captions not in the middle, but like middle of the middle. So it's not right at the bottom where I know stuff is going to be. I give them margins on the sides just because I don't want anything to get cut off. But it's a lot of trial and error. Honestly, if I do open captions for a video, because I use an external app, I don't do it in the platform. And sometimes it is like, okay, I got to go back in there and I got to adjust these a little bit because they're being cut off. Auto-generated captions, much like auto-generated alt text, is not good. I try really hard not to use them because most of the time they screw up words, they screw up punctuation. I have a speech impediment, so sometimes they misunderstand me. So if you can avoid doing auto captions, I highly recommend avoiding it. Hopefully every platform soon will allow you to upload SRT caption files like you can do with Facebook and Twitter. I would love if we could do that with TikTok and Instagram too, and make things a lot easier when it comes to captioning videos.
Awesome. I think for me, this might be a silly reminder, but one of the things that I have to think about when I film is like, don't put the camera so close up to my face, because then I have actually no room to put the captions.
Yeah.
Film with some nice space around you. I think that
helps. My rule is always at least right below my collarbone when I have myself recording, which is very rare, so that at least I have, this space between my chin and the bottom of the screen where I can put captions that will hopefully not be blocked and they won't be like over my face.
Yeah.
So that's my rule of thumb.
That's a good one. All right. I think that is everything for today. Thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you so much, Alexa, for your presentation. Like I said, I really think people learned a lot. Everyone go to her LinkedIn. It's kind of amazing. You're an influencer.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me. It was great talking to everyone, and I hope everyone found this informative and helpful.
Awesome. Bye, everyone. Thank you.